Well, the organizers wanted me to speak for some time, and I thought um, I would actually try to take you through a journey of how things evolved in healthcare in last 50 years. Now, why such conferences? I mean, we have been to so many inaugurations and talking, and there in various people is important, but the concept that drives this program is far more important. Now, if I look back to the 1970s and try to nostalgically recollect what was the era of healthcare, and I'm sure those of you who were born before that, you'd remember how the healthcare was in that era. It was, I call it, a sort of linear delivery of healthcare. And what do I mean by a linear delivery of healthcare is a doctor sitting in a clinic and a patient walking into the clinic, and those doctors were almost looked upon as a god in that community because he was not only a doctor but also a sort of social navigator in the whole community. And that was how the healthcare was. And believe me, if you look at the perception of the population walking in the streets, they still believe that is the perfect model, and that is what they try to look at a healthcare deliverer in today's society as well. But things changed. And what were the changes that took place? I would call post-World War the biggest, one of the biggest renaissance in healthcare was the post-World War II. The next landmark renaissance was in the 1980s, and possibly we are going to see the next renaissance after this pandemic. 1980s changed the scenario of healthcare. It was a decade of innovation. It was not suddenly that people became more intelligent, but at the same time there were so many things happening in the field of technology that it actually poured in, or rather skimmed into healthcare delivery as well. And when it came into the healthcare delivery, there was a boom of investors. I call it the sugar daddy of research. I mean, you have a concept, but take the concept down into innovation and finally to the market, you require a sugar daddy of research. And those were the multinational companies who started investing in healthcare research. So what evolved in that particular time is understanding of the genes. There was understanding of the molecular biology of cancer. There was understanding that laparoscopy is going to take over. And that was the era when people also started thinking that probably 2 decades down the line, we might have a replacement of human being in the form of robots. So what these innovations gave us was a boom. I mean, it was suddenly from a community healthcare, it went up rocket high. It was a rocket science suddenly. And when it was a rocket science, and when that community doctor started thinking that I would need a laparoscope instead of the small 20-bedded nursing home where I was operating, suddenly he was at a loss. He cannot afford a laparoscope. He cannot afford a CT scan. He could not even afford an ultrasound machine. So it was in the mid-1990s that the healthcare scenario changed its character from a linear graph to something which is called a triangle. At the three ends of the triangle, of course, the doctor remained at one end of the triangle. The other end of the triangle was the patient, but the top of the triangle was the investor. And the investor who invested in CT scan machines, the investor who invested in buying a laparoscopic machine to create a modular OT. So from linearity to the change in triangular form of healthcare was the event in the 1990s. And therefore, there was a boom in development of, instead of community healthcare, to corporate hospitals. And suddenly you will find the AMRIs, the CMRIs, the Apollo Gleneagles, the Fortis, and so many of them, they suddenly cropped up in different parts of the metro cities. And therefore, what happened was that healthcare became costly. So suddenly in the linear model, where somebody could deliver things at a cost-effective, budget-friendly package, suddenly it became costly. And if you look at the model at that time, at the end of 1990s and the beginning of 2000, the model was to create a state-of-art technology-driven hospital. It was not an innovation model that was designed by someone out working in Dharmotala or in Mumbai. It was a model of the United States which was just implemented here. And therefore, suddenly, people had access to laparoscopic surgery, to genetic studies, to advanced cancer treatments. But there is always a flip side of that. The flip side of that was it was gradually going beyond the capacity of common people. And if it goes beyond the capacity of the common people, whose perception still continues as a community doctor as the model of healthcare delivery system, a contradiction came in the mind of the population, and this led to the generation of something called mistrust. And what was the mistrust? They didn't understand that the same community doctor's son now does a laparoscopic surgery and the machine costs 30 lakh rupees. And he writes a PET CT scan which costs 25,000 rupees. But his father was prescribing something called an X-ray. This perception did not reach the population. And if it did not reach the perception, to the population, it naturally led to a booming of mistrust amongst the population. So when we looked at the model down the line, in mid-2000, things started changing. That was the third phase in healthcare. This phase has not come to the Western world, but this phase has come to this part. So you look at this, there are three folds in healthcare delivery. One is the doctor himself, who invests himself in skill development. And if you look at the stalls, you'll understand the skills where a doctor needs to uplift themselves. And myself, being who was trained in an open surgery, now do a laparoscopic esophageal cancer surgery, a laparoscopic liver resection. I had to change myself over a span of last 2 decades, because if I do not change, I am going to die professionally. The second aspect, as I was telling, which is far more important, is a costly healthcare. The challenge is people walking in the street can obviously go to the top shot 7-star hospital and get a delivery of healthcare at 30 lakh rupees. But what happens to someone who is in Purulia or someone in a metro city who cannot afford this healthcare? So this was the big question. And the easiest solution that was thought of by most government is that they are going to give a socialized system of giving subsidy to healthcare. But I can assure you with good amount of certainty that this sort of insured, socialized structure of healthcare is not going to survive for a decade. It has not survived in the NHS. It has not survived in the US. It has not survived in any damn country of the world, and it is not going to survive here. It's just, I am sure, the policymaker knows that this is a passing by phenomenon, and it's going to go off in 5 years' time, like what we saw in the LPG gas system. You started and then you started to take off, withdraw the subsidy. And that's going to come in healthcare as well. So the question now is, what is the solution? You have a short-term solution of delivering healthcare by a socialized system. But that's not the solution. Countries like India, with a population of 1.3 billion people or 137 crore people needs to find a solution themselves. And I call it Indian solution to Indian problems. And what is that solution? Is innovation of cost-effective healthcare. And that is the reason I tell you why this conference is unique. Because India needs to find out a laparoscopic machine or an operating room table or a whole structure which caters to the budget of the middle class. And fat middle class is the main group of this population. So we need to promote innovation, and so you look at this. So you have to bring back the perception of a community doctor and deliver healthcare in a cost-effective way. The circle is full. You are actually going back to the 1970s, but in a modified form. You need to deliver, you need to come out with a Dishari hospital which Sharmada created. I'm sure I don't remember the exact year, but I had been to that place. They deliver laparoscopic surgery to 50 patients every day at an affordable cost. And how they can deliver it? Because every single component of the hospital caters to a cost-effective, quality-assured healthcare system. So you need to take care of the every bit, I mean from the cotton to the gauge piece, to the oxygen cylinders, to the laparoscopic machine, to the operating room table, to the ventilators. Everything needs to be modified according to the need. And if you can do that, what is going to happen is you can deliver healthcare at an affordable cost even at the periphery. One good thing about all these socialized healthcare delivery system, be it the Shastro Shati or be it the Ayushman Bharat and such other things, is that it has sort of legalized advanced medicine. So if you have legalized advanced medicine, and if a healthcare deliverer sitting at Jalpaiguri feels that if I have to be there, I need to buy a cystoscope and I need to learn ureteric catheterization because I cannot refuse that. If I refuse that, the socialized structure is not going to allow me to generate revenue. So they are learning. So you understand it's a positive loop that is working. So people are learning technology to deliver because that's part of the new medicine form. People are learning to innovate, people are learning to deliver in a cost-effective way. And therefore I feel these conferences actually raises more hopes. These conferences, I am really pleased to find that we have so many Indian innovators sitting there. I have been, I don't want to name them, but I have been through J&Js and Medtronics over years. But what they sell is a costly product. We don't need the ITC Royal where people go out and take biryanis. We want franchisee of Siraj at every corner delivering the same biryani in a cost-effective and possibly a better biryani than ITC Royal. Thank you very much.